Welcome back to the Deep Dive, the place where we sift through the sources so you can get straight to that aha moment.
Ah,
Today, we are taking on an immense and often invisible public health crisis, osteoporosis. We're talking about that low bone mass and microarchitectural deterioration that can turn a simple fall into a truly life-changing event.
It's a massive concern, and it really permeates the entire healthcare system. I mean, to put some numbers on it, in the United States alone, we're looking at about 10 million adults over 50 who are affected. And that leads directly to something like 1.5 million fragility fractures every single year. And, beyond the numbers, it's the chronic pain, the loss of independence, the toll is just staggering.
And we do have treatments, pharmacologic ones, but they're far from a silver bullet.
Not at all. There are real constraints. You have suboptimal adherence. Patients don't always take the drugs correctly. And then there are tolerability issues.
And those rare but very serious adverse events like
Yep.
medication-related osteonecrosis of the jaw, that's terrifying.
It is. And that whole situation, that huge unmet need, is really what sets the stage for our deep dive today.
Okay, so what's the potential solution we're looking at?
Well, our source material is a recent systematic review that zeroes in on a non-pharmacologic alternative, hyperbaric oxygen therapy, or HBOT.
Right, HBOT.
The review pulls together all the preclinical evidence to see if this treatment, which, we've used for decades for things like chronic wounds or for divers with decompression sickness.
Bends, right.
Exactly. To see if it holds any direct anti-osteoporotic potential.
So let's just unpack that concept first. For anyone who's not familiar, HBOT is essentially
What?
you're breathing pure oxygen inside a pressurized chamber.
That's it. It's under elevated atmospheric pressure. And by doing that, you're forcing way more oxygen into the blood plasma, which lets it get to tissues that might normally be oxygen-starved.
So the big question for bone health is, can that surge of oxygen actually help rebuild or, preserve a crumbling skeleton?
That is the core hypothesis. And this systematic review, which looked at 6 pretty recent preclinical animal studies published between 2016 and 2025, it gives us some, surprisingly consistent answers.
One thing I noticed is that the review included a really wide range of animal models. They weren't just looking at one cause of bone loss, which feels important.
It's vital. That's a real strength of this review, the heterogeneity of the models. They looked at rats, specifically Wistar and Sprague-Dawley rats, and they subjected them to all sorts of things meant to mimic human osteoporosis.
Like what?
Well, you had ovariectomy models, which simulate postmenopausal estrogen loss. You had hind limb unloading, which is like long-term bed rest or disuse. Even spinal cord transection and degalactose-induced aging.
So, okay, across estrogen loss, physical disuse, neurological trauma, and aging. 4 very different pathways to get osteoporosis. What was the consensus when they introduced HBOT?
The consensus was overwhelmingly positive, really robust. Across the board, HBOT consistently improved the structural integrity of the bone. We saw big improvements in bone mineral density, which is, the main measurement of bone mass.
Right, BMD is the headline number. But what about the stuff that's harder to measure? The actual scaffolding inside the bone, the architecture that dictates its real strength.
That was significantly enhanced, too. Key metrics like bone volume to total volume, or BVTV, went up. That just means more of the space was actual solid bone.
So it's less porous.
Exactly. And we also saw improvements in trabecular thickness and trabecular number. So essentially, the little struts inside the spongy part of the bone got thicker and more numerous. The whole structure just became much more resilient.
And did that translate to, actual physical strength? Could the bones take more force?
Absolutely. The mechanical tests, which are usually these 3-point bending tests on a femur or tibia, they showed enhanced biomechanical strength in the HBOT groups compared to the controls. It wasn't just looking better, it was genuinely stronger.
Let's get into the chemistry here. Bone is always in this state of flux demolition and construction. How did HBOT shift that balance?
It tipped the scales hard toward construction. The study showed a significant jump in markers for bone formation, things like PINP, bone-specific alkaline phosphatase, and osteocalcin.
So the bone-building cells were getting a huge signal to get to work.
A massive directive. And at the same time, the demolition crew was told to slow down.
So the resorption markers went down.
Precisely. Markers like CTXI and TREE-CP5B were significantly reduced. This is powerful evidence because it shows HBOT is actively regulating that fundamental biological cycle of bone turnover.
Okay, but this is where it gets tricky for actually using this in a clinic, right? HBOT isn't a pill with a standard dose. It's a protocol. How consistent was the prescription they used in these successful studies?
This is the biggest hurdle for clinical translation right now. There was significant heterogeneity, but most of the successful protocols use pressures between 2.0 and 2.2 ATA.
So about twice normal atmospheric pressure.
A little more than twice, yeah. With oxygen that was nearly pure, about 85 to 100% for sessions that lasted, say, 40 to 60 minutes. It's a pretty aggressive treatment.
But the review also mentioned a different approach, a mild one, that got very different results.
It did, and this is critical. One study used a much milder protocol, only 1.3 ATA, 40% oxygen, but for much longer sessions of 3 hours. And that milder protocol, it reported only minor, far less significant effects.
That distinction seems key. Because if it's that dose-dependent and you need that high-pressure threshold for it to really work, it suggests that getting the pressure wrong makes the therapy almost useless.
It creates a major standardization challenge. We're essentially trying to write a medical prescription for a physical phenomenon, and if we don't know the exact recipe, the pressure, purity, duration, we can't move this from the lab to the clinic reliably.
So the data confirms what HBOT does. Let's get into the how. What are the molecular blueprints behind this consistent success?
What's really fascinating here is that HBOT isn't just a one-trick pony, it's coordinating a whole response. It seems to work by rebalancing bone remodeling and, just as importantly, improving the osteovascular milieu, the local blood supply and environment in the bone.
Okay, let's start with the big one, the central command for bone health, the OPG-NKL axis.
Right, so the first core mechanism is that HBOT modulates the OPG-NKL axis. Now, RNKL is the signal that tells bone-resorbing cells, the osteoclasts, to mature and get to work. HBOT boosts the synthesis of OPG.
And OPG is what? A blocker.
Think of it like a decoy receptor. It mops up all the RNKL floating around so it can't activate the bone-resorbing cells. HBOT basically puts a big stop sign on excessive bone breakdown.
And it's not just stopping demolition, it's also pushing for new growth through the Wnt pathway.
That's right. The second part is restoring the Wnt beta-catenin signaling pathway, which is essential for telling progenitor cells to become bone-building osteoblasts. And it does this in part by reducing the production of something called sclerostin.
And sclerostin normally acts as a brake on bone formation.
It's the bone's internal braking system, exactly. So by knocking down sclerostin, HBOT essentially takes the brakes off the osteoblasts. It accelerates the construction phase.
So it's a dual action agent, slowing the demolishers and hitting the gas on the builders. What about inflammation? We hear so much about inflammation and oxidative stress driving osteoporosis.
And that brings us to the second major mechanism, a really powerful antioxidant and anti-inflammatory effect. And this is where we see a bit of a paradox.
How so?
When you flood the system with pure oxygen under pressure, HBOT initially causes a brief transient spike in reactive oxygen species, ROS. You'd think that's bad.
Like a kind of biochemical stress test?
Precisely. And the body's response isn't to panic. It's to launch this robust, adaptive, antioxidative counterattack. It ramps up its own internal antioxidant enzymes, like SOD, which then go on to clean up the chronic oxidative stress that drives the disease.
So it's not just putting out the fire, it's upgrading the whole fire department.
That's a great way to put it. And by doing that, it directly reduces these chronic inflammatory drivers like TNF-alpha and IL-1 beta. It's cleaning up the toxic environment that allowed the bone to become vulnerable in the first place.
And that environment is totally dependent on good blood flow, which I think brings us to the next mechanism.
Mechanism 3, angiogenesis and neural support. HBOT is pro-angiogenic. It helps build new blood vessels. It does this by stimulating growth factors like VEGF and BFGF. Better blood flow means better oxygen, better nutrients, better waste removal, all critical for healthy bone.
And I saw that in the spinal cord injury models, there was a neurological connection too.
Yes, which is fascinating. In those models, HBOT enhanced the synthesis of a neuropeptide called CGRP. This peptide is involved in local blood flow and bone metabolism, which suggests there's this complex feedback loop involving the nervous system, the blood vessels, and the bone cells themselves.
Okay, and let's wrap up the how with the anti-aging effects. This one really caught my eye.
It's critical. HBOT was shown to reduce the expression of key cellular aging markers, specifically P16 and P21. By slowing down this cellular aging, or senescence, it helps osteoprogenitor cells differentiate into healthy, active osteoblasts.
And beyond that, it was helping with the actual raw materials.
Yes, it was shown to promote the deposition of inorganic minerals. It actually increased the bone's content of calcium and magnesium, which are obviously essential for structural rigidity.
Wow, okay, so if you tie this all together, this isn't a single target drug.
Mhm.
HBOT is hitting almost every pathological pathway at once. Signaling, inflammation, oxidative stress, vascular health, even cellular aging. That breadth of effect is maybe the most powerful argument for its potential.
It really is. And as we think about moving this towards the clinic, there was one finding that stood out as particularly promising.
The synergy advantage.
Exactly. One study found that combining HBOT with treadmill exercise was significantly more effective at preventing bone loss than either one was by itself.
That makes so much sense.
It does. It suggests the best path forward might not be HBOT in a vacuum, but HBOT as a powerful adjunct to fundamentals like physical activity. It's a high-tech solution boosting a low-tech one.
But, and this is a big but, moving this from rats to humans means we have to be really clear-eyed about the limitations in these studies.
The limitations are substantial, and they have to temper our enthusiasm. We already mentioned the high heterogeneity. The different models and protocols made a full meta-analysis impossible, so it's hard to generalize robustly.
And there was a specific issue with how the outcomes were measured. Detection bias.
Yes, a high risk of detection bias. This is so important because a lot of these outcomes, like looking at histology slides or CT scans of microarchitecture, they involve some subjective judgment. If the person analyzing the results knows which animal got the treatment, there's a real danger of subconscious bias.
And a lack of blinding in basic science is a huge red flag.
It is, and that loops us right back to that standardization challenge. This isn't just a theoretical problem. You can see it in the conflicting biomarker data.
Right, you're talking about the osteocalcin finding.
Exactly. One study reported no increase in this bone formation marker, OCN. But another study, which used a much more intense protocol, 90 minutes per session, 60 sessions total, showed a notable increase.
So the dose isn't just about if it works, but how it works.
Precisely. This inconsistency confirms that the pressure, the oxygen, the frequency, the duration, these aren't minor details. They are the crucial, undefined variables. HBOT is effective, but it seems you need the right key to unlock the mechanism.
So what's the bottom line for you, the listener, trying to get informed on this? Let's distill the key takeaways.
I think the big summary is that the preclinical data is very compelling. HBOT consistently shows positive structural effects on bone across many different disease models.
And these benefits are driven by these broad spectrum pathways. It's rebalancing hormones, it's reducing inflammation and oxidative stress, it's stimulating blood vessel growth.
It's a genuine candidate for a non-pharmacological solution to a massive health crisis.
But the challenge remains. While the evidence suggests HBOT works, we still can't write the prescription for a patient.
That is the crucial point.
And that leads to a final provocative thought for you to chew on. Preclinical data has proven that HBOT can work, but the next critical step is to define that exact prescription. Can researchers design the rigorous human trials powered for real-world endpoints like actual fracture reduction, not just scans, that can finally tell us the specific pressure, duration, and frequency needed to move HBOT from a promising observation into a standard, evidence-based therapy? Because that complex standardization is the biggest mountain left to climb.
Thank you for joining us for the depth dive.
We hope this dive helped you feel more well-informed. See you next time.